So, we just want to get started, pal. So if you just want to introduce yourself to everybody, how you got to where you're at now, playing pro, etc.
Yeah, Todd Gleave, 25 now, so getting on a little bit.
Yeah.
Started off at, I was in the London Irish Academy when I was at school, in the age groups, sort of around 16. My last year of school, I ended up doing my ACL in a sevens tournament,
All right.
which as a front rower, I was obviously a bit livid about playing sevens and getting injured. So from that, I ended up missing out on an academy contract because I was obviously injured. So kind of applied to university, took a year out to kind of sort my knee out, see what happened. Played for my local side, which was East Grinstead, who they're in like National 3, I think, at the time. So it was like a decent enough standard. Like coming out of school, it was obviously quite good. From there, I ended up getting a trial at London Scottish, did the back end of the season there, and then signed there in the summer. So I did a year there, and then went to Roslyn Park as well. So it was around the London area, and then full circle, ended up back at London Irish after a few boys used to come on loan to Roslyn Park from London Irish. So the coaches used to come and watch the games. So I ended up full circle back there, which was quite funny. Obviously, some of the boys that I knew from before were still there. Was at London Irish for a few years, and then had the opportunity to move to Gloucester, which I'm now been there for moving into my third season. However you want to take it with lockdown, end of the second, third, and then so George now coach at Gloucester was the forwards coach at London Irish as well when I was there. So it's kind of crossed paths quite a few times with a few different people there. And then obviously takes me to where I am now.
Yeah, cool. Just flicking back a bit, it'd be interesting to hear about your experiences with the ACL injury. So when did you have that? At 16, did you say?
16, 17. I was pretty young doing that.
So obviously at 17 years old, with knocking on the door of a professional contract, and that setting you back. Obviously that must have been difficult in itself. So it'd be interesting to hear about kind of maybe your mindset around that and how you got on, obviously at the other end of it, like you have done.
Yeah. So initially when I'd done it, I just thought like I'd hurt my knee. Wasn't really too, like when you're young, you're obviously not too aware of like the body and how it works. Obviously as you get older, you start to kind of get to know your body a little bit more. So I just thought, I've hurt my knee, I'll be fine in a few weeks. Like rested for a few weeks, and then there was like another sevens tournament. So I tried to train leading into that, and I was like running, and my knee was just like giving way. And I just said to the coach, like, I don't think I'm going to be able to play. Like, there's something not quite right. Managed to get like a scan, thinking, this is maybe just going to take a little bit longer. And then when the guy told me you've done your ACL, you're looking at kind of 6 to 9 months. I kind of didn't really believe.
Yeah.
It's obviously quite an adverse situation when you're young. It's a long time as well. I was obviously on the brink of potentially getting an academy contract. So it was obviously everything that I didn't really want to hear.
Yeah.
But in terms of that, like, I spoke to a few different people. Luckily, at the time, I had a guy called Andy McKenzie who was in the army, worked at Headley Court with some of the soldiers there, and he helped me with my rehab. He kind of guided me pretty heavily all the way through. I was because I knew I had a year out to kind of get my knee right, so I was pretty focused in terms of that. Like, I knew I've got a year, like there's no rush, just get your knee 100% right and just see kind of where you end up. But I kind of, like I didn't really leave any stone unturned. Made like a bit of a journal as well each day, just
okay.
So like when you're like you're not very mobile at the start when you're on crutches and stuff. It's obviously hard to see from like week 2 to week 4. You're like, have I actually made any progression? But looking back on it, I literally wrote a couple of notes down each day which was actually made quite a bit of difference because you can look back and you're like, oh, as much as you're still on crutches or you still can't do whatever you want to do, you're like, I've actually progressed from doing basically nothing.
Yeah.
So that was something that I found pretty helpful. And then I just like worked pretty short-term goals in terms of like I wanted to be able to walk within a certain amount of time. I wanted to be on a bike by X amount of weeks. I wanted to have full range of movement by this date. So I kind of just set myself little mini goals, which I knew like if I'm hitting them goals, I'm on track to return sort of 6, 7, 8, 9 months time.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about obviously you felt you need go, but then you went then on to play 2 weeks later. And this is why I basically say it, and this is for anybody that's listening. If you are relatively strong and you do your ACL, people can actually play on them. People think that, that you do your ACL and you literally cannot walk. I've known people that because they're so strong in terms of like the lower body strength, because obviously the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, and everything can keep everything together, they can actually play a couple more games until they realise, fucking hell, I've done something bad here. Which is obviously what happened to you. You didn't realise it was as bad as it actually was. So I'm guessing at the time, did you have a decent bit, for a 17-year-old lad, you had a decent bit of strength about you? Is that right?
Yeah, like I trained, because of obviously being in an academy setup, I think it's probably more so now. Like you see some of the boys coming through now that are like first year academy boys.
Yeah, it's just mad.
they're stronger than 90% of the first team boys.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was maybe at the start of that phase of a cat where like they'd started to introduce a bit of an S&C program.
Yeah.
It wasn't like mega strict because you're obviously at school, but there was like a decent foundation there, and there was like enough there that it was down to you. You do as much or as little as you want, which I think is probably, looking back on it, it probably helps them out as well because it sees who's dedicated.
Yeah, definitely.
If people are training every day or they're doing all the sessions, then they're dedicated. Whereas on the flip side, you set a program out and you ask someone how many sessions they've done and they haven't really done anything.
Yeah.
It probably tells you quite a lot about where their mindset's at.
Yeah, definitely.
At the time, like my knee was sore, but it wasn't like, I didn't think it was like horrendous.
Yeah.
When the guys were like testing it, my hamstring was like firing loads, which is obviously like a protective mechanism. So yeah, like I guess like my legs must have been relatively strong. That was probably masking some of the pain.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's just one of them. Like some people cope with it better than others, depending on like what. Injury's so individual. It's like depends what other bits you've done at the same time as well.
Yeah, it's one of them in rugby as well, where I think that players are probably not as quick to say that something's wrong compared to other sports. Not throwing other sports under the bus, but I think that obviously rugby there's that kind of like mentality where you just kind of get on with it for a little bit until you are actually in trouble. Whereas it'd probably be better off at times just to bite the bullet a bit and just say, look, something's wrong here, and then get it sorted out a bit quicker. But yeah, it's interesting, obviously, listening to how you think you were at that start of the academy, kind of S&C really being implemented in, which obviously then took you into some form of like well-structured training, and then obviously as a pro, you've had that time to settle in, and then obviously Corona's come and thrown everyone and everything all over the place. So as a professional, then what did lockdown look for you day to day?
Yeah, we got sent like a guidelines sessions from the S&C coaches, which was like there was like running based sessions, which was like one was like a speed based session, one was like a repeated speed, and then there was two like more aerobic conditioning based like running volume sessions. And then they basically tried to cover everything because it's like, you don't know, some boys have got access to a park, other boys haven't got access, some boys have got access to a rowing machine, other boys haven't, and like the weights are varied. Some boys we basically stripped the gym from everything.
Yeah.
So I managed to get like a barbell and like about 120 kilos kettlebell and some bands. So I had like bits and bobs. But some boys, like some of the foreign boys, went back home. So I guess they were maybe limited in terms of like equipment that they had. So it was kind of varied in terms of when we came back. There was like some boys that had done loads of weights but not much running,
Yeah.
and other boys had done loads of running but not much weights. And then there was like even the running was like some boys had been like, I've just been going for a 5k run,
Yeah.
like you'd never do.
No.
Where other boys would be like, oh, I've just been doing like repeated speed stuff. So I basically tried to just follow the program because it's like it's mapped out, it's there for you. The guys that are in charge obviously know what they're doing. So I did all my training in the mornings because I kind of like to keep a routine. Just get up, having breakfast, do a session, and I train in the morning. And then by the time I'd be like finished, it'd be like midday, afternoon, shower up, and then I feel like I'd got through like a decent chunk of the day.
Yeah.
Was gone. I had access. I managed to get a watt bike online from a guy just before lockdown.
Yeah.
Which was pretty handy in terms of that. And then there's a local rugby club just down the road, which I did all my running sessions at. And then I just had a barbell in the garden. I've got a concrete block, and then I was using my wheelie bin as like a squat rack. So it was pretty mix and match, but like the sessions were like all mapped out, and then
Yeah.
So
So like obviously for you, you said you was able to keep a little bit of structure in terms of your gym work and your running. Some boys wasn't. I mean, when you returned back to club, was there any testing in place to see kind of what people had either lost or retained over that period?
no, we didn't test.
Or was it just straight back into it because of time?
Well, so because of how it worked out, we couldn't just slot straight back into rugby, so we had to be in a small group.
Yeah.
So they split us like position specific groups, and there was like you do a running block and then a weight session, and it was pretty pretty mega strict.
Yeah.
Because it was like that was when COVID was still pretty prevalent. So it's like you turn up, you do your temperature screening, etc. You'd be straight. You wouldn't even go in the building. You'd be straight on the pitch, do your running session for say 45 minutes. Go wash your hands in the gym 45 minutes, and then everyone's got to leave because the next group's in.
Yeah.
It's not like everyone's in at the same time. I think they didn't do testing because it's like because there's such a broad range of boys. It's like you can't, because of how strict it was, you can't expect everyone to be up to
a certain level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if someone hasn't had access to something, it's like it's not really through their fault. But from my understanding, like everyone came back in pretty good, like pretty decent shape, and like it wasn't too. You're obviously going to take a bit of time getting back used to things, but it wasn't too much of a shock. I think the biggest thing was the contact and stuff.
Yeah.
Like everyone was running fit and like had done some form of weights, but you can't really replicate like contact involvements. So that like there was no testing, I think, because do you really want to make someone go maximally on their first session back when they've been for 3 months or however? Like I think personally it's like a smart idea because it's like the balance is you should kind of sit with off season a little bit. You say to guys, go away and have a rest for 5 weeks, but you need to come back and you've got to be as fit as you've ever been to beat your testing scores. And it's like you're not really going to get exactly what you want. You either want someone to rest and come back in respectable condition, or you want them to train really hard whilst they're away and beat their yo-yo score or their Bronco score or whatever. So I think it's kind of finding the balance of that.
Do you feel personally that you've managed to maintain well, having the equipment that you've had, etc.? Because it's been such a long period, obviously. Because I mean, what's it been since the season ended? Was it March? Was it April? Yeah. So what's that? April, May, June, July. Looking at like 5 months maybe until you actually returned, compared to what a normal off season would look like.
Yeah.
Have you felt a difference when you return back, or do you feel like you've actually managed to retain a lot of your usual scores?
I feel like I managed to maintain quite a bit. Yeah, like you just kind of make use of what you've got and you kind of adapt your routine a little bit. Obviously not ideal, but like you just got to make do with what you've got. And I think like if you train, no matter what you've got, if you're training hard, you're going to get some form of gains or at least maintain what you've got.
Yeah, definitely.
You could have 300 kilos of weight, but you don't lift hardly any of it.
Yeah. Well, this is basically what we try to say to our players at the start of lockdown, is that it's cliche, but if you don't use it, you will lose it. I mean, you're not going to, from home, you're not going to make any ridiculous gains, let's say, but you are going to manage to maintain at least something. So yeah, it's an interesting perspective to it from your side of things. So let's forget about COVID. Let's sack that off for a second, and let's think about you as a pro day to day. So before, obviously, all these protocols are in place in terms of cleanliness and hygiene, and because of COVID, what would a day to day, look like for yourself in the week leading up to a game?
Yeah, the days obviously change depending on like the start of the week to the end of the week taper in terms of training load and stuff. In terms of my individual routine, like I like to get up pretty early. I'm not a fan of like rolling out of bed and just getting straight into training. Some boys like it, but I've never really been like that.
Yeah.
I'd say like I'm pretty organised and don't really like to leave anything to chance. So I normally get up pretty early, walk the dog, and then I'd say I'm normally one of the first in. I like to go in the gym, get moving, just so I'm like awake. Then we have breakfast at the club, and then I normally will, if it's a Monday, get in the analysis, watch some of my clips back from the weekend, and then you normally have weights and a meeting first thing on a Monday. Monday we do lower body weights as like a bit of a flush, and it kind of varies depending on like if you're not involved or you're on the bench, you're trying to hit pretty big numbers Monday morning. Whereas if you've played maybe 60 plus minutes, you're trying to get through a bit, but you're not killing yourself, because it's kind of that balance of you're probably still a bit fatigued from the game. So there's quite a big emphasis on like quality of movement. So like you might drop the weight on Monday if you've played more minutes and just get through like a decent range, which is probably better in terms of like Monday you're kind of using it as a recovery and a learning day still quite a bit. Then like Tuesday's like your upper body day, which is like you normally by Tuesday you're feeling all right by then. So you can upper body as well is normally not too bad. And Tuesday's like the physical day, so you normally do like your scrums and mauls, and it's normally a bit longer in terms of like running volume.
Yeah.
And then in Thursdays is like a power day. That's like your big power stimulus. So there's normally like the Thursday gym session will be a power exercise with maybe some upper body bits. And the Thursday field session pretty speed based. Trying to hit pretty decent speed numbers in terms of that. And then Friday again is like tapered down as like you basically your stuff, your details done. You just kind of putting the finishing touches on it for a Saturday game. Normally like after training during the week varies. We eat after training once you showered up, and then I normally come home, chill out for a bit, and then I normally do mobility in the evenings after dinner. Just depending. I've got like a circuit that I normally do, mobility circuit that I get through most evenings.
Yeah.
And then like Wednesdays and Sundays is your off day. So I'll normally try and like go to the pool or something like that on a Wednesday just to kind of mix it up a little bit. Trying to think what else we've got. Sometime on a Friday, on a Tuesday, after a big day, there's ice baths if you need them, and after a game as well. But like I have pretty like regular routine in terms of like normally get moving in the mornings, mobility in the evenings, and it kind of stays pretty similar because you know like what normally gets tight or what normally needs moving, and then yeah, like try to get a decent amount of sleep, and make sure like I'm eating well. Really.
Yeah, that's spot on, mate. It's interesting hearing about the obviously like the undulation of your intensities throughout the week. Because I think at your amateur levels, I think that's probably one of the biggest setbacks that players have in terms of the way they structure the training is they feel like they've got to go 100% ham every single day, and then they get to a Saturday and they're already blowing out their arse.
Yeah.
So just hearing you there that actually Tuesday is right, that's your day where you're going hard. You know it's going to be a tough day, but then your Wednesday's obviously your recovery day. Thursday's power and speed, so nothing that's going to cause too much soreness leading into the weekend. Because you see it all the time at the amateur rugby level where people are smashing a fucking massive leg session on a Friday night and then struggle to walk on a Saturday. So it's interesting hearing how you structure it. Moving on there, so you've touched on food, that you look after your food yourself. So you've got a decent nutrition background, is that right?
Yeah, did a course through. It was kind of a bit of a last minute decision. One of my friends at London Irish got told about a course through the S&C guy called MNU, and he messaged me basically saying, "I'm doing this. Do you fancy doing it? Because obviously doing it together is a bit easier. You can obviously bounce ideas off each other." I wanted to do something outside of rugby, just to kind of, sometimes if you've got downtime or whatever, it's quite good to just take your mind off of rugby and delve into something else. I looked at it and it was like, I think it was like half an hour left until the deadline to register. Right. And I was like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, and I did it. The module was like about like research methods and stuff, and I was thinking, oh no, like what have I done here? This is not what I thought I was signing up for. But that was that was like the first 2 or 3 weeks as like an intro.
Yeah.
And then once it got into like module 2, I think there was like 7 modules, I think, in the end. So it was like 18 months worth of like a lecture a week with like some work to do at home, and then there was exams at the end. But once you got into it, I was actually like really enjoyed it. Had like what I thought was like a pretty decent understanding in terms of like what I needed, what I didn't need, how to like taper it and stuff. But it just kind of consolidated that, and it, like looking back on it, it was a lot harder than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Because I'll be fine, like I know a decent amount. It will just obviously help me out, but it went like pretty in depth, and it was I enjoyed it. It was cool. It was cool to do.
Do you feel like you've been able to implement your learnings then straight into your sort of like your day-to-day diet, so you're better off from it from a professional sportsman point of view?
Yeah, I think so. Like I'd say I had a pretty decent understanding in terms of it before, but it's now maybe just like it's consolidated, like some of the stuff. Like I'd know what to do beforehand, whereas now I know like why I'm actually doing it. Like someone be like, you need to do this, and I'll be like, yeah, I'll do that, and I'll do it, but I wouldn't really know like why. Do you know what I mean? Like if someone says,
no, completely,
you need to eat this amount of protein per day, and I'll be like, okay, like I'll do that. But now I'm looking back on it, I'm like, oh, he wanted me to eat that amount of protein because it's 2 grams per kilogram body weight.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, definitely.
Like, whereas now I know, like, I'm doing that because.
It's a great point you're saying. The word you said there was like why. I think that in professional sport, this is something that we should probably see a little bit more as well in terms of like the education around a few things. Not because we want players to go on and be nutritionists or S&Cs, but as an S&C coach, I can stand there and talk about sort of like loaded strategies and periodization of volume intensity. But if the person doesn't have any clue about it and doesn't know why, they can be a bit like, nah, like if you don't know why, you don't really want to do it a lot of the time, I think.
I feel like if you don't delve into why as well, it's almost like it's that added bit. Like if someone's searching to know like why, it's shown like they're constantly want to improve and get better. And it's like if you know why, they've got like a bigger understanding of like how everything works, like the cogs in the machine turn. It's like, whereas if it's just like blunt, this is that, they're going to be like, okay, but they're not going to fully invest in it.
Yeah, completely.
It's kind of like the training and the nutrition marry up pretty similar as well. Like, you can train as hard as you want, but like, if you're trying to gain weight and you go home and you don't eat anything, you're not going to gain any weight.
Yeah.
Do you know? And like fueling, you're like training and stuff like that, and then you'll be like, why do I feel tired?
Yeah.
It's like, you're probably not eating enough.
Yeah, completely. It's again, it's another fundamental that people just, they think it's one of those cliche sayings that you can't actually out-train a bad diet or a diet that doesn't exist. Like, you need to fuel what you're actually doing. So I think that's a great point. The why bit there is a great point. It's it underpins a lot of the stuff that we do in terms of the Project Academy, which is what we deliver with Perform, and we basically give like seminars every week. Not like you've got to be sat down at this time to do it. It's more of a case of, look, here's a 50-minute video on warm-ups or whatever. Watch it in your own time, just to help people get a bit better understanding. So, no, it's great that you said that. So, moving on. So, just kind of like to wrap up a little bit, really. So, some great points you've made, and I think people fucking get lows from the 30 minutes we've been talking. But for you personally, like, what's next? So you're 25. What do you reckon in a COVID-free world is coming next for Todd Gleave?
Good question. It's kind of like, because of how the season is at the minute, we're like finishing this block of games.
Yeah.
And it's not long before the next season starts. So it's kind of like, I want to make sure I'm fully focused on these games now, but I want to be in my best possible position for the start of next season.
Yeah.
As much as like rugby's a team sport, it's so individual, because it's like everyone's got individual things that they need to do to make them tick.
Mm-hmm.
Like my individual prep is going to be completely different to someone else's individual prep, but you've got to respect like each person. That's how they deal with it, or that's how they get ready. So it's like, it's so individual, but I'd like to just make sure like I'm in my best possible position for the start of next season, so that I'm playing like week in, week out, and touch wood, I'd like to try and stay injury free. So obviously part of it, and I feel like they come in bunches sometimes. Like, you normally find, like, you're coming back from one injury, you normally pick up another little niggle. Where it's just like being as diligent as you can around that. But I'd like to just make sure I'm in a decent position. I think everyone's pretty keen. Like, having 4 months off from rugby is like unheard of. It's I've only been doing it for like a short amount of time, but I've never had. You normally get like a 5-week break at the end of season, and like that's it. And like, there's some guys, some of the guys that work at the club said like they've been in professional rugby since it started in like '95, and they've never had the break.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think you just got to take it for what it is, and like not get too caught up. Just like every day, live day to day, and I'm very like process driven. So I just like to get like a decent routine, and just like I said, like everyone's routine is different. Like, my routine is different to the next person's routine. But once you find out what works for you, I feel like that's the best. And that's probably, if I was giving advice to anyone, that would be my biggest thing. Find out what works for you and just stick to it, and don't do something else just because your mate's doing it.
Yeah.
Because it might work for him, but it might not work for you.
Classmate, appreciate your time. That's 30 minutes of gold, I think, for a podcast. So thanks very much, mate. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for having me.